am Al McFarland. Welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarland. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. As always, we promise what I call a robust conversation, and that certainly will be the case today. Before we begin, let me thank those who might be joining us across any of several social media platforms. We stream this program every day across two YouTube channels, YouTube of Black Press USA, the Black Press of America National Newspaper Publishers Association. Thanks to all my colleagues and all the readers of the Black Press of America. We stream it on the Insight News TV YouTube channel as well. People that subscribe to Insight or follow Insight get this program, get notification. But in addition, we are available every day on LinkedIn and on Twitter. We are available on 3 Facebook channels, the one for the National Newspaper Publishers Association, the one for Insight News, and the one for Al McFarland. And so our goal is to connect. And we want you to help us in that endeavor. How do you do that? First of all, give somebody a call, send a tweet, make a post. Let somebody know that an important conversation is going down right now. We're talking about reparations today. We're talking about, therefore, the past. We're talking about the present, and we're talking about the future that we are committed to building, that celebrates and recognizes our humanity and that demands justice, repair for the damage done in this culture, in this society, in this country. That's an important conversation, and it's one that we've sort of, on the one hand, at least according to so-called mainstream media, we've been inconclusive or indecisive about. They have always raised questions about the legitimacy of our inquiry about getting paid for what was stolen from us, our lives, our labor, and beyond. And on the other hand, within the community, there's always been a deep-seated sense that justice must be done, and justice must include reconciliation and repair for the damage done through the international criminal enterprise called slavery, international slavery, the Atlantic slave trade, and more. So those are the discussions we want to have. If you've got a point of view, a question, or an answer, a solution, a scenario that you want to put out there, this is the place to do it. Let's talk about it. And feel free to say whether you agree or disagree and why. It's all part of how we spend time together. We focus on sharpening each other as we pursue the ultimate game, the ultimate aim, and that is liberation, freedom. Our goal is the freedom of our people. Well, lastly, we want to invite all of you who are listening, who are watching on any of the platforms, to subscribe. We're north of 600. Our goal is 1,000. You can help us by becoming a subscriber yourself, but you can also help by letting other people know that they should subscribe. Encourage them to join this program, join this conversation, because it's a critical one and one that we need to take advantage of. My note here says that watch time from subscribers, 83% of the people that are watching, and we thank them for watching, are not subscribers. Only 17% are. We want to change that, reverse that, so that 83% of the people that are watching are also subscribers, and that we, with their help, with your help, continue to convert the 17% or whatever number there is into subscribers. We want to build a community, build a platform that freely allows us to express, to argue, to challenge each other, but to challenge the world, but to be committed to the notion of liberation, of freedom for our people. Well, let me get into the topic. Let me say who's going to be around today. Several great guests. Dr. Akila Murakam is here. She's the president of the Afro-Descendant Nation, and joining her in talking about the critical topics today, on her team, Senator Hubert Bass, a former city council member out of West Memphis, Arkansas, and more. We'll talk about that. But locally, we've got people that have been great advocates and that are great advocates for the discussion and for the purpose, the intent of creating support for reparations for our people. And they include my friends and colleagues, Brother Nick Muhammad and also Brother Thomas Berry. And through them, we're also connecting with another guiding light in our community. She'll be joining us audio, I think not the camera, but Kellis Houston is with us. So it's a big group of us here to have an important conversation. Enjoy the conversation. Like I said, if you're listening and not part of our in-studio guest, you can join by making a comment in the comment section. And if you want to be on, just send a note in the comment section. We'll figure out how to get you in the program as well. Well, let me begin by inviting onto the screen Dr. Akila Mukaram. And you're going to correct me so that I can say that name perfectly proper. But let me say, she's the president of the Afro-Descendant Nation. She's a dedicated professional educator, has been a passionate leader who advocates genuine freedom, justice, equality for Afro-descendants. She consistently champions equity, inclusivity, and social justice. She's done that throughout her academic and professional careers. She holds a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering, 2 master's degrees in education and school leadership, and a doctorate in educational leadership. Her past roles include serving as a former First Lady and Speaker of the House of Representatives for the Afro-Descendant Nation and delivering a compelling address at the United Nations on the critical importance of educating our children. Presently, her focus lies in uniting Afro-descendants under the auspices of the Afro-Descendant Nation with the overarching goal of attaining self-determination as a unified Afro-descendant community. She's passionate about fostering a global understanding and acceptance of our Afro-descendant identity and views this as a recognition that is pivotal for unity among our people. Dr. Mukaram, thank you so much for your work and thank you for being here. Good afternoon. Welcome to the conversation.
Good afternoon. Better pronunciation there. Mukaram is correct.
Mukaram. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Mukaram.
Thank you for having us.
Tell me first today about the name. Tell me about both names, Akila and Mukaram. What's the meaning, significance, and how have those names come to you?
Well, I used an African names book when I first was interested in becoming a Muslim in the Lost Foundation of Islam under the Honorable Salis Muhammad's leadership. And Akila means intelligent one who reasons. And Mukaram means honored and noble. So that name came from my husband because he decided on Mukaram. So.
Okay. Beautiful names, and beautiful that you've chosen to identify yourself and to create your own identity, and the naming is a critical element of that. So thank you. Tell me about the Afro-Descendant Nation, and how do you want to make sure we have properly addressed the question of reparations during the course of this hour?
Okay, so the Afro-Descendant Nation is what we would like for all Afro-descendants to unify under. Our mission in the Afro-Descendant Nation is to unify all Afro-descendants around the issues of self-determination, human rights, and reparations, because we want to develop a nation that's peaceful. We want to develop a nation that has liberty and fair and just laws, because we know that the laws here in America, they are not really meant for us to be successful and to have true freedom, justice, and equality. So that's what we're looking for in the Afro-Descendant Nation. Okay.
Where is it based and how does it operate? How does it show up in community and in the world?
Okay, so
as an organization and as a movement.
Okay, we are headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. The Afro-Descendant Nation was given birth to by the Lost Foundation of Islam. So this is, I would say, a brainchild of the Honorable Salis Muhammad. And we first were set up originally as the House of Representatives being the captains, the female captains in the Lost Foundation of Islam. The senators were first the ministers in the Lost Foundation of Islam. In the House of Representatives, there's an East and a West gate. So there were female captains were in the West gate, East gate, male captains. So it's male and female in the House of Representatives. And we do have, of course, a president. We have a Chief Justice as well. So we have all branches of government as like the United States does. And so we want to have our own government so that we can eventually have our own land and be able to set our government there as well. And we know that we are a nation of people, and we are inside of another nation of people here in the United States of America. That's basically how we started. Now we are looking, and we have been seeking, even before we truly set up as the Afro-descendant nation. The Honorable Salas Muhammad had sent out correspondences to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and other leaders and individuals, prominent individuals, to ask them to join with him to set up the Afro-descendant nation.
What responses were there?
The government of the Afro-descendant nation. I'm not sure that he got any responses back. I don't recall him getting any back. And so no one came, but that didn't stop us.
Sure.
We had the audacity to move forward and keep it going. And so now it's for all Afro-descendants. So that means that others who are not Muslims, who are not Lost Foundation of Islam members, we are seeking for them to come into the Afro-descendant nation, because we set it up for all of us.
Let me ask you, Doctor, to talk a little bit more about the Lost Foundation of Islam and sort of put that in the context of the experience of Black people in the West in this country. All of us, I think, are generally, if not specifically, familiar with the story of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. All of us have a general understanding about the evolution, at least in a couple of ways. One under the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, and one under the Honorable W.D. Warith Dean Muhammad. And if you want to sort of retrace that for us, it would be, I think, instructive to give people the context out of which this movement for self-identity and self-liberation is occurring.
Okay, so the religious part I don't want to go through. Okay, so during the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's time, the works that he did, he was building a nation. It was all about nationhood. The flags were flown in the temples, in the mosque, everywhere. So, and we fly our flags in our nations. And so with that in mind, and during his time as well, he raised up an $88 million nation, or somewhere above 80 million. And we had airplanes, had all kinds of businesses, had a bank. You know, these are what things, structures that nations have. And so looking at what he did, everything was all about nationhood. So with that, the Honorable Salas Muhammad is continuing on with that. And now I think the Honorable Elijah Muhammad would have been greatly pleased with the work that the Honorable Salas Muhammad has done and is doing and moving forward with us having a nation that we can call our own. And that's what it was all about. And also, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was seeking reparations for us as well as a people. If you would read on the back of the Muhammad Speaks newspapers, it was what the Muslims want. And so all of that was reparations as well. So we've been at this for a long time. And I think that it is, well, I won't say I think, I know it is our time now to continue to move forward.
If you don't mind me to just keep probing a little bit, I'd like to learn more about simply me, the Honorable Salas Muhammad. I'm not familiar with that person, and maybe share with me who he is and how he has emerged in the forefront of the lost found Nation of Islam.
Okay, thank you. So the Honorable
And if my
Salas
questions are inappropriate, tell me. I'm just.
Oh no,
okay.
I mean, yes, we should know.
Okay.
Someone has to write our history.
That's right. That's right.
Right? Okay.
That's why we're here.
Yes, definitely. That's fine. The Honorable Salas Muhammad was the captain in the during the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's time. He was over Muhammad Speaks newspapers. Actually, he was a top salesperson and over the bakeries. And during we know that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad passed away. And then there was a rift in the Nation of Islam where his son had steered away from his teachings, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's teachings, and went to Orthodox Islam. And during that time, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was following him. And then so in August, there was a spiritual, the 21st of August, there was a spiritual declaration of warfare. That's what it has been termed, that the Honorable Salas Muhammad went and delivered to Wharf Dean Wallace Muhammad. And at that time, a little bit after that was delivered, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, he broke off from Wharf Dean Wallace Muhammad and set up his own, although the Honorable Salas Muhammad was trying to have them do it together and have the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan out front. So there have been several attempts for them to, the Honorable Salas Muhammad has made several attempts for them to come together. So it hasn't happened yet. Okay, so the Honorable Salas Muhammad set up the Lost Found Nation of Islam, and it is in line with the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's teachings. And he has been very instrumental in going to the United Nations. He and his wife, our Queen Mashaki Muhammad, who is our lead attorney of the Afro-descendant nation, Harriet Abu Bakr Esquire. They have, and also Ida Hakeem, have been in the United Nations working to obtain reparations for us as a people. They have been there at the different conferences that the forums that the Honorable Salas Muhammad was asking for, so that we as people who have the same experiences or have gone through slavery, for us to come together and then they, at that point, they decided on an identity for us, and that identity is Afro-descendant. So that's how we, and I know we don't have enough time to go into the full details. So we did a national reparations convention in October of last year. Mm-hmm. And the Queen, who was Harriet Abubakar Esquire, went through it in more detail. Mm-hmm. So if you can, we can have people look that up and listen to that full information about it. So now we have
put it in the chat, and we can share that to our viewers and listeners as well.
Okay, all right, mm-hmm. We'll do. Okay, so now we're at this point, and we want our voices to be heard. We want a seat in the UN because we are a nation, mm-hmm. and no one is speaking for us. Mm-hmm. When America goes over to speak, they're not speaking for us as Afro-descendant people, mm-hmm. but they're for Americans, and they're going to do what they want and think is best for them, and do things that would benefit them, not because, you know, it's good for us as people. Mm-hmm. So we need to do things that are good for ourselves as well.
Listen, Dr. Mukarram, thank you for that broad and sweeping summary and contextualization. It certainly gives us sort of a sense of how we move and how we've come here. And thank you again so very much. I'm pleased to learn about the work and the movement and the development. Thanks to and shout out to Muhammad Speaks News. They're watching the program, and thanks to Ida Lawrence. Thank you. Greetings back to you, Ida Lawrence. Thanks to Michelle, who's our ongoing #1 supporter and booster out of the East Coast. If you're listening, watching, joining anywhere, send us a note, get a question, a comment, drop it in the comment section. We'd love to have your voice, your feedback, your comments. Let's expand the conversation then, Dr. Akila. May I call you that, Dr. Akila?
That's fine. Yes.
Okay. And bring in another colleague of yours. I introduced his name, but I want to bring him on. And okay. That is Senator Hubert Bass. Now, Hubert Bass is a Navy veteran. He's a former city councilman for West Memphis, Arkansas, a former justice of the peace for Crittenden County, Arkansas. And now, as I described him, as the current senator for the Afro-descendant nation. As a profession, he's a registered respiratory therapist. Brother Senator Hubert Bass, welcome to the conversation. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you for having us here.
We should have checked your lighting before. The lighting behind you means your face is in a shadow, and maybe when I take a break, you can figure out a way to light in front of you, because now we're just looking at a shadow online. And while you're doing that, let me bring in my Minneapolis, St. Paul people. Nick Muhammad and Brother Thomas Berry, join the conversation and welcome. How you guys doing?
Oh, doing great, brother. Thanks for having us on.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for having us.
Let me have you sort of, as we move into this national and global discussion, talk about what's happening right here in St. Paul and Minneapolis. I think St. Paul is one of the few cities in the country that's actively considering reparations. Thomas Berry, give us some background on that. And Thomas and Nick, between you, talk about the reparations movement here in Minnesota. And then we'll bring in our national guest to talk more about the large picture.
So Nick can talk more about St. Paul, and I could talk about I'll do the Twin Cities after Nick.
Yeah. So first, I'd like to acknowledge the senator and the doctor. This is my first time hearing about some of the work that you all are doing, and I do think it's incredible. So I look forward to doing a deep dive into what's going on in the conference that you guys have coming up too. And again, my name is Nick Muhammad. I'm the executive director of Black Civic Network in the Twin Cities. We're a 501c4 political advocacy organization. We work at the intersections of public policy and Black family interest. And as far as the reparations work, we've also authored one of the first statewide or state targeted reparations bill for American Black people, descendants of the slave experience. And we also, I'm one of the commissioners of the St. Paul Reparations Initiative. And that initiative in and of itself is a commission right now that is looking to explore how to deal with local city governments and ordinances in order to begin to repair some of the damages done by the city of St. Paul to its Black residents. Chief amongst that and the catalyst of that is centered around the Rondo and the Rondo descendants, and starting there as kind of like a petri dish of a test model that we might be able to run to see how we can run effective policy to roll out reparations initiative, municipal department by municipal department. On the state level, we're looking to establish what we call the ADOS Reparative Justice Fund and Department. And we're looking to actually build and construct a fund that would operate like an endowment that would actually create enough revenue or a steady stream of revenue that African-American led and organized entities can actually draw from as a resource, as opposed to constantly going down to the state and trying to figure out how we're going to fund several initiatives. So those two efforts are the two biggest ones that we currently are leading as an organization.
Brother Thomas Berry, jump in.
No, Nick is saying it all. I mean, that's pretty much the crust of it all. It's being able to, on a local level, do something that we've never been able to do, and that's being able to chart our own course, just like every other citizen group. You know, we do want to be made whole, and one of the things that we have to always remind our people is that reparation isn't just pie in the sky. It was something that was given to us in 1865 and shortly right after taken away from us. And it's something that we should teach not only our children, but we need to teach society in general. You know, the whole credit structure that we're under now is a part of reparations back to the slave owners who lost their chattel slaves after reparations was taken away from us. Those are the things that we have to know. And the other piece that we do talk about outside of the legislative piece is how do we repair the relationship and bond amongst ourselves as people. That's very important too, because that was one of the things that we needed in 1865, time away from the white society so that we can build and heal ourselves mentally, physically, as well as spiritually from the damage that was done to us for over 500 years.
Let's bring in Senator Bass. Let's have you build on from there. Senator Bass, talk more about, why is restorative justice necessary for Afro-descendant people? And in your mind and in your organization, what does full and complete reparations looks like? Finally, what is the purpose of seeking international support for Afro-descendant people in the United States?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's crucially important that Afro-descendants or Black Americans receive restorative justice, which just means reparations and repair. And the reason it's crucially important and absolutely necessary is that without reparations, without repair, we're just not going to be able to compete in the American framework. The wealth gap continues to grow between Black and white and others in this country. Even illegal immigrants that come to this country are being propped up and put above our interests and our needs. And without reparations, like I said, we won't be able to compete in the American framework. Complete reparations looks like us having a nation of our own with defendable borders. You know, it's one thing to build a nation within a nation, which we all have to have a starting point. But at the end of where we're wanting to go and our hope and our desire is a nation with defendable borders. It's very important that we take our claim to the international community so that not that other nations and people around the world don't know what has happened to us here in America in the slavery diaspora, everyone knows what happened to us, and they also know what they owe us. They know what they done to us, but we still, through the process in which this world that we live in, we still have to go through those processes. Now, there was a time that the United States was a very favorable nation in the eyes of the world. But I would say now that in this day and time, that the nations don't view America the way they used to view America. And every nation in the United Nations have one vote. There's been many instances in the United Nations that where America supported something that we felt was wrong, that they were outvoted, or something that we felt should be passed, like the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, for instance. The United States voted against it, but it was passed by the overwhelming majority of the nations that belong to the United Nations. So America is on the decline. But as America falls, we have to be coming up, because if we don't meet that challenge, we don't want it to fall, and we're not prepared. So now it is our time to restore ourselves and to seek reparations from the United States. Like I said, they know exactly what they owe us. And I want to add too, we're conducting a national plebiscite vote for our people to participate in, to say to the international community and to the International Court of Justice that we want to have the right to self-determination, the right to liberation, the right to a land and freedom and of our own. And you can take that vote if you just text the word reparations to 1-877-506-2184. That's 877-506-2184. Text the word reparations, and you can participate in our plebiscite vote for reparations and self-determination for our people. And one more shout out to, we're having a National Reparations Convention in Washington, D.C. That's going to be May the 17th through the 19th. And I believe that information is being shared in the chat. But you can look that up on my page, my Facebook page, Senator Hubert Bass. And, just continue to share that information and text the word reparations to 877-506-2184.
I'm Al McFarland. This is The Conversation with Al McFarland. We're talking about reparations. And no matter where you are, we appreciate you tuning in, checking us out either on either of our YouTube channels or Facebook platforms or LinkedIn or Twitter. And we want to hear from you. If you got a comment, a question, or something you support, something you object to, we value your voice. Send us a comment. We'd like to share your thoughts. Dolorisa Summers writes, we must change the laws written that we are not owned by the state. So we are not owners of ourselves. Change the laws. Let me read that again. We must change the laws written so that we are not owned by the state. And she says, at present, I think she means that at this moment, we're not owners of ourselves, and we should be, therefore change the laws. Thank you for the comment. And she put in the number there for the plebiscite as well. Well, listen, and we might share that. Nick and Thomas, let me have you respond to the three questions raised and responded to by Senator Bass. Nick, what do you think?
If you could restate the question, I was.
Well, the questions were, why is restorative justice necessary? What does full and complete reparations look like? And what is the purpose of seeking international support for Afro-descendant people in America? And in particular, what do you think is the feeling among ordinary people in community about the idea of preparing for liberation? And is liberation a genuinely broadly accepted desire of Afro-descendant people? Or is that something we're developing and growing as time? goes by? Is there some work that has to be done to get our people to understand what sovereignty means and what it should mean for us, and how the challenges will be as we move towards some sense of sovereignty, or what's the right word for it? Self-determination, liberation. How will that reconfigure the way the world is organized at the present time? That's more than was in the response. I'll keep adding stuff, and you can take it where you want to, Nick.
All right, TB, I'm gonna tag you in a minute. So first off, absolutely, it is necessary. It's a critical component for our survival, and I don't use that word lightly. The world is moving, and it's constantly been moving. But I want to read something to kind of contextualize some things, because there's a lot that we don't know about our own history. There's a lot that we don't know about things that we've already achieved. And what I'm going to cite is an excerpt from 6 articles that were under General Sherman's Special Field Order number 15, ratified by Congress and given authority by then President Lincoln after the Civil War. It says the blacks may remain in their chosen or accustomed vocations, but on the islands in the settlements hereafter be established, no white person whatever, unless military officers and soldiers detailed for duty, will be permitted to reside in the sole exclusive management of the affairs will be left to the freed people themselves, but subject only to the United States military authority and acts of Congress, by laws of war and orders of the President of the United States. The Negro is free and must be dealt with as such. Now, the reason that I bring this up is because that particular excerpt established a territory, and a lot of people don't understand this. When we talk about 40 acres and a mule, there was actual land allocations that happened during the Civil War. That land allocation was the beginning. It was the seeding of us having land and sovereignty. And it was explicitly clear in that particular field order that there was to be no interference from white people in our autonomous sovereignty and seeding of that particular land. That was supposed to be the beginning. Now, we all know what happened in Lincoln. After that, there was an assassination, and President Johnson swiftly moved in and gave those same land allocations back to the slave owners who were supposed to be punished for betraying the American government. That being said, since then, we've forgotten that particular article. And that article holds weight just as it does as other treaties for Native Americans, and just as it does when you go to the UN for other independent people who are speaking on behalf of different government treaties and contracts. That is a contract that is specific to the Black people of this nation. And that's not something that we have to prove. It's not something that's hypothetical. There were 6 articles that was written. It exists. We need to get back to understanding those particular legal frameworks that are necessary for us to be able to achieve reparations today. The second thing I want to say about our community's understanding of reparations, we've allowed the media and certain sensationalized groups to water down the meaning of what reparations is. Reparations is a legal process. It's not a matter of, it's not something that's personal in the sense of something you could feel a way about. Reparations puts into context what happened to us. It allows for the historical wrongs to be put under the eye of the law and the eye of the Constitution. Without framing what we're looking for in the context of reparations, everything we say becomes unconstitutional because we're looking for race-based initiatives to be made into law, or exceptions to be made in the law, or concessions to be made in the law based upon race. And without reparations as the spear tip, it becomes, quote, unconstitutional. Now, to the doctor and senators' initiatives on a national level, we applaud that. And we're just on the ground on the local level and the national level within the country, using the tools that we have available to make sure that we're making a comprehensive effort to, 1, assert the rights that were established in these treaties, and then 2, making sure that we're educating our community members about the existence of these treaties, so that we're not trying to, turn a hill into a mountain. right? So if we don't understand these things, we will approach something strictly on a race-based level, and they will hamstring us with the perversion of the 14th Amendment. We've seen this in several initiatives that we rolled out where Black people were the targets of many racist policies and procedures. And once we call them out, they'll say, well, we can't reverse this for Black people because it's unconstitutional, because you're asking for something specifically for Black people. The only way that it becomes constitutional is if the framework and the legal framework of reparations as a legal framework for us to proceed forward. And the third and final thing that I'll say in terms of the future and looking forward, there's a couple of things that concern me, and a lot of people aren't privy to what's going on in the world. People hear the term World War III, and they think about Normandy and World War I and tanks and planes. The new world war will not be fought in an archaic fashion of tanks and planes. It will be fought in financial institutions. It will be fought over jurisdiction of information and access to information. So as the world moves forward, you have AI and all these other new inventions that are already literally putting people on notice that, hey, you may be out of a job soon, and the world is getting smaller. Governments are cooperating with each other, a lot of them against the American government as far as the new developments of financial systems. And the US dollar is literally worthless. And we have to wrap our minds around that particular fact. Land is still land. Allocation of land is where we need to draw the line. Allocation of resource to produce on said land is where we need to draw the lines. We have to make sure that we're aware of the world moving and how the world is moving, because without it, right now, we're centuries behind industrialized countries and countries that have access to technological advancements, that if we don't have reparations, the chasm of wealth disparity that we're talking about now, we haven't seen anything until we come into this next era of financial technology that's getting ready to happen with things like the BRICS nation, which is just simply Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, who've come together to stand against the US dollar standard. And they've already put the world on notice that they're getting ready to move away from the US dollar as a basis of trade, which is going to come back and literally impact our quality of life here in the States. Because once that dollar becomes declines in value, that inflation is going to come home to rest, and we're going to have to be looking for a new way to, substantiate or establish a quality of life that makes sense. And if you don't have land, you're going to be in a very, very tight situation.
You mentioned the 14th Amendment. Talk about that. What did you mean?
So the 14th Amendment, for those that, are familiar with the law, was created to protect the 13th Amendment. So when Jim Crow and the Black Codes was happening, it was simply because a lot of the white slave owners were upset at the concessions that were made by the Freedmen's Bureau and through the act of war in Congress and the US president and the Special Field Order number 15, establishing us as free people and giving us a land allocation and government resource to protect said land and establish our borders in said land. And the Jim Crow laws and the Black Codes were meant to roll those back. So the 14th Amendment was written to basically say you cannot, on the basis of race, create a law that deprives anybody of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, as we move forward after the Lyndon B. Johnson era, and the activation of things like the affirmative action laws and acts that were put in place to, quote unquote, help Black people get into spaces where we could meet quotas and have a fighting chance and equal access to certain things and businesses that were owned by whites, which is really not all that great of a deal. But that was the spirit of what affirmative action was set for. They actually began in the 80s to come up with ways to undo those particular provisions. So the 14th Amendment was used in a sword fashion. Instead of being a shield, it was turned into a sword and said anything that was made on the basis of race, denying anyone any damage, was unconstitutional. So you had cases where you have young men going to medical school, in the case of Bach in California versus the university, where, there was 16 spots out of 100 allocated for African Americans, and he wanted one of those 16 spots, and he was denied based on race, and he won that case. That's a case switching the disposition of the 14th Amendment from a shield protecting Black people to a sword attacking Black people, because we have spaces and concessions that were meant to catch us up and repair some of the damages done from slavery. But that's what the 14th Amendment, the abuse of the 14th Amendment looks like, and how they use it. I think you're muted. Yeah.
Unmute. Yeah, take a break and come back in a second. Before we do, hello to Angela Conley. Thank you for joining the program, Angela. Thank you for being here. Hello to Ida Lawrence. Ida says, I am a white American in full support of reparations. Enslavement is a burden we all carry. It is a spiritual burden, a wrong done, and it has never been acknowledged, much less apologized for and repaired. Thank you. We'll take a break and come right back. Dr. Akila, I'm going to come to you when we return because I want you to respond. The question that I want to throw out there is Constitution or outside of the Constitution. What does it mean to, on the one hand, try to achieve a liberation? Does that liberation live within the U.S. Constitution, or is it outside of it? Is it an either or is it a both and? Think about that. We'll be back in a second. I'm Al McFarland. This is The Conversation with Al McFarland. If you've not done so, consider getting vaccinated against the COVID-19 virus. At vaccine.gov, enter your zip code, your preferred vaccine type, and you get a map with locations eager to serve you. Getting vaccinated saves lives. Vaccine.gov can help you do your part. Okay, I'm Al McFarland. Welcome back to The Conversation. What a great conversation. Nick, thank you for that. Dr. Akila and Senator Bass, thank you. Also, Brother Thomas Berry. I'm going to bring another person in as well. But Dr. Akila, let me ask you to respond to that presentation by Nick. And the question I had in listening to you and to him, I don't know if there's a contradiction at all, but I want to explore the possibility of competing strategies. One, it sounds to me that the Afro-descendant nation is actually moving and equating nationhood with liberation. Nick, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is talking about standing on the promise and the principles of the Constitution. Is there conflict there? Doctor?
Thank you. Actually, we will be fighting on many fronts. So no one organization, no one person has have all the answers, I would say. So we're treading on uncharted territory, and we're learning as we're going. I'm looking for us to work together collectively in speaking in one voice. Whatever front we're on, we're still speaking in that one collective voice. So I have been working to organize the organizations and to pull in our reparations groups and leaders to come up with a comprehensive strategic reparations plan on how we move together collectively, because we're so disjointed right now. So we're not in competition with one another. We just need to work together collectively with one another. Nick is fighting here on the national front. We're fighting on the international front. I believe that we should have a nation that we can call our own, and that's the stance and has been the stance of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Salas Muhammad, continuing on, that we should have a nation that we can call our own, like the Jewish people did. They fought for their liberation. They achieved reparations, and they're not the 400-year-old slaves, but they used that and they got a land that they can call their own. We, the 400-year-old slaves, 400 plus years old slaves, we don't have anything, and people are always fighting us when we even speak of reparations for ourselves. It's time now for us to do something for ourselves, and we just need to come together collectively and decide what that is that we're going to do. And I hope that Nick would have a conversation with me, and we can sit down together and work this plan. I think you're doing a great work in working with the municipalities and such, and working on this level, because there are things that we have to do here, for ourselves. And prior to us getting the land that we can call our own, we have to do something in the land where we are. So we may be able to get some cities here that can be our own. There are certain things that we can do. We just need to work together to do it. We are a diverse people. We can have unity without uniformity. That's exactly what we have right now anyway. But we're all seeking the same thing. So let's get out of our own way and come together and do what we need to do for all Afro descendants. Thank you.
His Mana has sent a note in the chat saying, peace, good people. Is this lineage based, or are you promoting something different? And that's a good question, because there is a discussion of what's lineage. Maybe I think the California, the Los, or was it San Francisco, Nick, and
it's California. It was the entire
California passed legislation that was anybody that could demonstrate their lineage should be part of some kind of a settlement. Talk about that, Thomas Berry, and then why don't you introduce Kellis and bring her into the conversation?
All right, so lineage based, I think, is very important, because I do believe that us as descendants of slavery,
lineage versus race, or not?
I think it should be lineage versus race, and let me tell you why. I was just having a conversation with Nick and Sister Khalees yesterday, and I said, those of us who are born as descendants of slaves, we have never grew up in a time when we were able to govern ourselves on our own land with our own resources, and every other group of people can say that they have done that. When we talk about humanity and being able to leave your mark on civilization, we've done a lot of great things, but imagine how greater things would have been if we would have had that space to really have that true freedom as human beings. And as Dolores Summers, who is my cousin, by the way, is stating quite finely, is that, we are still property of the state. That's why they lock us up the way that they do, because they know right away that they can enact the slave clause on us as soon as they imprison us, and they don't care whether it's our adults or if it's our babies. So it should be lineage based, and we don't have the same type of gripes as other groups. They have reparation groups inside of the UK. They have reparation groups inside of the Caribbean. We should support all of the reparations groups. We should also support the UN Council, who just said on March 25th that reparations should be given because of slavery. They said that it's long overdue. That's not the first time that the United Nations has said this. They've said this back in 2009. Back in right before 9/11, the conversation was there was a problem with Zionism and white supremacy or racism across the globe. And everybody was saying that was the number one threat to humanity. And they were having the conversation of reparations at that point. So I do believe that there should be a conversation, but I do also think lineage based does not mean that we do not work with our brothers and sisters across the diaspora. We should be looking at this as chess. We need to reclaim as much land as we can that is ours across the nation. You see what's happening inside of Africa right now with the Chinese going through trying to colonize or recolonize Africa after 2006, telling the world right there on 2020 that they are Africans too, and that they were announcing from the motherland that they were going to begin. You see these types of games get played with us, as John Henry Clark once said, the great ancestor, that we as Africans have always had. We've always had a hiccup when it comes to global politics. We have to get our minds right. And one last point about 1865 on into Reconstruction. The one thing that I do say about that period, it's like the unspoken period amongst our people. If you take from 1865 all the way to 1920, Look at what our people did once we got freed. Look at the towns that we built. Look at how we went back and found the relatives that were sold off to many plantations across the country. Look at the love that we showed for each other. We even got into politics. Look at all of those great things we did during the Reconstruction period. You never talk about it. We go from 1865 directly to the Civil Rights Movement because no one wants to talk about all of the thievery and theft that happened to us once we put our minds and hearts into repairing ourselves. So even if we don't necessarily get what they consider reparations from them, we still need to have that reparative mind state amongst ourselves. We can still build this nation amongst other nations and be strong. But as long as we feel like we have to get white acceptance, right? Because that's what happened when that group of Africans went back to Liberia, right? They still wanted white acceptance. And even though they got the land and they got the freedom, the first thing they did, they started selling that land back off to the white folks that was their captors in the first place. So this is not just about resources. This is about mental and spiritual repair as well. So those are the things that I like to think about in reparations. And to introduce Sister Khalees Houston, I think her bill, the African American Family Preservation Act, is a reparative bill. I think that's a reparations bill. She is trying to repair families who have been harmed by child protection services, who is doing a bang up job across the country on all of our families. They are taking our they're taking our children away. And you know, if our children are the future, if you're taking our children away, what does that say about our future? If our children are being mined off, if our children are being pushed into sex trafficking and human trafficking across the country. While I love the idea of repairing ourselves as adults, we can't forget the babies. We always have to put those babies first. So, you know, I believe her bill, and this is what Brother Nick was talking about, that reparative lens, not allowing them to use the 14th Amendment to shield us from getting justice for the laws that's targeted us directly. That's why we use reparations in every aspect that we do over at Black Civic Network.
Khalees Houston, we've got around 3 minutes. Jump in here.
Khalees Houston.
Khalees, thank you.
Yeah, as Brother Thomas mentioned, our children are being targeted through the child protection system. This is a decades-old issue that's very prevalent here in the state of Minnesota. I wrote the African American Family Preservation Act in 2017. We continue to push it here in Minnesota. As Nick stated, they've been using a perversion of the 14th Amendment to block its progress, but we have moved successfully through the Senate. We have one hearing left in House Judiciary, and we're just asking for the community support on that. I don't know how much I can add here if we're on for just a few minutes, but if there's any questions related to it, I'm here to answer. Thank you.
Well, what we can do is come back. I think the issues are important, and this is sort of an opening conversation on this program. We've addressed the question of reparations before. As a matter of fact, we did a program several years ago when we were doing the show live at Lucille's Kitchen in North Minneapolis. It's like 15, 20 years ago, where we had Randall Robinson as our guest in studio, and we talked about his book, The Debt. I know that Nick and I have talked about the impact and importance of that book, among others, in shining a light on creating consciousness, awareness about the question of reparations. And when we did this at Lucille's Kitchen, we tried to amplify it and internationalize it by sending two of our reporters to Berlin to interview, as part of the program, leaders of the German Jewish reparations movement who were demanding and who received reparations from the German government because of the theft of life and property of Jewish people as an act of the state. And we wanted to show the equation that the theft of life and property of African people is a criminal act of the state, and therefore must be addressed if we're talking about justice. Well, listen, I've got a last couple of seconds here. President Dr. Akila, let me have you make an invitation to our viewers and listeners to stay in touch and to stay connected, please.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having us on today. We really appreciate it. If you would like any more information or to reach out to me, reach out to info@afrodescendant.org. That's info@afrodescendant.org, or you can contact me at adnunity1@gmail.com. That's adnunity1@gmail.com. And if I have a moment, I would like to just read our working definition for Afro-descendant, and to also state that we're looking at all Afro-descendants globally in the Afro-descendant nation. So we're for all Afro-descendants, and that's approximately 250 million of us globally. Afro-descendant is our great unifier. This is how we can unify without being concerned about our religious beliefs, our ideologies, or anything. So the working definition for the term Afro-descendant is Afro-descendant refers to peoples who were forcibly dispossessed of their homeland, Africa, were transported to the Americas and slavery diaspora for the purpose of enslavement, were subjected to slavery, were subjected to forced mixed breeding and rape, have experienced through force the loss of mother tongue, culture, and a religion, and or have experienced racial discrimination due to lost ties or partially lost ties from their original identity. We have been severed from our identity here in the United States of America. It left us without a nationality. And as the Honorable Salas Muhammad stated in his lecture during the February Saviors Day, is that our nationality is Afro-descendant. Thank you so much again for having us on.
Well, thank you. And before I close, I want to bring something up that I introduced you to and others. We at Insight News have created what we think is an innovation. And that innovation is to bring a section in the newspaper every week that we are calling Afro-Descendientes. And this is a place where we take one article, this most recent article, the English part is Global Solidarity with Haiti. We present the article in Spanish, in English, in Somali, in Yoruba, in French. And the idea is to get us used to thinking globally, internationally, recognizing that we own these idioms that we use, and that we're not a stranger to our international connection, our diasporic connection. So I want to share that with you and invite you to share it with everybody that you talk to. This is one small step in creating a different mind, a new mind in our people about who we are and how expansive we are in the globe. With that, I want to thank all of my guests. Thank you, Dr. Akila Mukarram, President of the Afro-Descendant Nation. Thank you, Senator Hubert Bass, Senator of Afro-Descendant Nation. Thanks to my colleagues here, right in Minnesota, Brother Nick Muhammad and Brother Thomas Berry, and she had to leave us, but Sister Khalees Houston. I think I said it right, Khalees Houston. Thank you for your work. I'm Al McFarland. We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.